Hi there and welcome back to Courtside for episode 2. If you are joining us on episode 1, thank you for your company again. If this is your first time in listening, then you are most welcome. Today we're going to hear from two wonderful people, a wonderful couple who are not courtsiders, more they are pitchsiders and international stadium sider parents. Steve and Joe Willis. Steve and Joe's two boys, Jack and Tom, are both professional rugby players with Wasps and have represented England. This is just going to be a fantastic conversation with two brilliant parents who simply talk openly about their joy of watching their boys play the sport that they collectively as a family love. So I hope you enjoy the conversation, and there's a whole lot of learning for all of us as sports parents in it. Before we go, as usual, please don't forget to like, to subscribe or to comment after this podcast. All feedback is welcome. All endorsements help us with our ratings. So without further ado, take it away, Hackney Children's Choir.
He's Courtside Dad, he's Courtside Dad. He dreams of Wimbledon, he's Courtside Dad.
Steve and Joe, welcome to Courtside.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's great to have you with us. Now, we've got one thing in common. Well, I'm a courtside, you're a pitchside or a stadium side parent. But there I think our similarities end. Our boy plays tennis. Your boys play a sport that our little one said he was far too delicate to play a few years ago into the world of rugby. You've got two star boys, Jack and Tom. Both have played and represented England in under 17s, 18s and 20s, and have both had their senior debuts and play for Wasps. That's not a bad place to start, really. So there's the headlines of these two young men, but what I'm really interested in is what's your journey been like as pitch-side, stadium-side parents, watching Jack and Tom from a local club level to then professional contracts and watching them represent their country?
As you can imagine, it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, really. You know, when you start watching your children, you don't expect them to be where they are today at all. That's not at the forefront of your mind at all. It's all about them, you know, just taking them to play sport and enjoying themselves. And I mean, I guess strangely the difference from watching them when they're younger and watching them play for England or start for Wasps, the feelings aren't actually that different, except for the, you know, the achievement, the pride that they might represent their country or whatever. You're still just watching them in the same way. You know, you're watching for when they do something well, when the smile on their face when they achieve something. I know it seems bizarre, but it doesn't feel that different once it gets going.
Yeah, I can understand that. But for you, Joe, is that the same for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've always just supported them. So, you know, I think we discussed with you at the beginning, both of them tried it out, but it wasn't proper rugby, so they stopped. So that was fine. That's what they wanted to do. And then, back at it. And then, never looked back. And we've just been there to support them. So it's been a great journey.
So what are the highlights on that journey? What are the highlights in that journey that you might say that's brought us the biggest joy in watching your boys play?
I think just their enjoyment of the game, really. And I think for them, it's a massive thing for us to support them, not just Steve and I, you know, their sister, my parents, Steve's family. You know, they've always got a massive amount of support. And whenever either of them have been interviewed after games or what have you, that's been one of the things that they've all said. For them, it's a massive, Jack said, to run out knowing, even if it's one person or 30 people, to know that somebody's there just to watch him is incredible, he said. So.
Yeah, I've definitely got a few moments, and one in my mind that sticks quite well was the first time they played contact rugby.
Right.
Maybe it's a dad thing. I don't know. It was the same with the boys. They couldn't wait to get that first physical contact game rather than tag, and they played a local team, Reading Gensians, and it just suddenly raised the whole level, not just on the pitch, but from the parents as well. Yes. And the vocals increased, and to be honest, it was like bees around a honeypot. You know, they're all just one giant maul driving backwards and forwards, and everyone just shouting shouting Eve, but it was a real highlight because I think Jack scored and they won the game. But another clear moment was with Tom when we were on tour in was it Chester or something like
Something
that?
like that, wasn't it?
And it was when he found his strength. And it was just like this moment in the game where you could see Tom realise that he was a powerful beast,
Yes.
and he's gone into a maul and ripped the ball off of someone else and charged up the pitch and scored. And Tom, he's a wonderful lad, and when he smiles, it just lights up the world. He's incredible. But I mean, if you wanted to throw some obvious big highlights in there, then watching the boys sing the national anthem when they're playing for England was,
Not a dry eye in the Willis household, I imagine, when that happened.
Oh,
And also watching them both play, their first senior game with Wasps together. So that was incredible.
Wow,
Just like, well, that's both our boys on the same pitch or in Wasps shirts. Like, whoa, just sort of pinch yourself a little bit because you go along with it, and then suddenly you think, I don't know.
They were only playing Saracens, so
Just a small game. So,
crazy.
So what is it in particular do you think that rugby has done for your boys, apart from just simply giving them the skills to play the game well? Is there other aspects to the sport that's helped them develop and grow?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, in particular with team sports, just that sort of interaction and bond that the guys get from doing things collectively and achieving something collectively. I think they gain so much in terms of friendships from rugby. It's such a family-orientated sport. Whether the club they were brought up in at Reading Abbey, I mean, it's such a tight-knit club, and so that it's not just about us in family support. They built up such a sort of big following of people. When we went on, we go on the tours with, in particular, Tom's age group, or even with Jack's, there's 100 people that go. There's bus loads of people who will spend long weekends with the kids, and we just all want to misbehave, really. So it's another opportunity to do that. But I think the guys, they've certainly learned a lot. I mean, the boys are fairly natural leaders as well. They're putting it in action in all of the games that they go into. They've captained a lot of the sides over the years. So I think they've gained huge amounts from
Same with the
sport.
coaches as well. I think both of them seem to sort of get on very well with the coaches, but in particular, so the coach that was involved when he was in the under-18s, he's now moved on. He's not at Wasps anymore, but Tom, regularly is in contact with him, and they meet up and have a Nando's together. And he always, I think there was one recently where he was interviewed about something, and he mentioned James Honeyburn in his, it was just a massive part of his. He feels he learned a huge amount from him. You just get on with some people, don't you, more than others.
But it's great because they get. It's good to have lots of good role models, and not just your parents. And I think that there's a lot of people that I trust in the sort of rugby community to spend time with the boys and listen to their advice. It's good to hear it from someone else. It's probably the same advice, but they hear it from someone else.
It's annoying. It's annoying when the kids do that, isn't it? or when they think they came up with the idea in the first place, but never mind.
Oh yeah. They are always right, especially now they're a bit older.
Well, it was interesting because I was in the previous podcast, and that itself was around tennis, but the conversation there we were having is around the coaches being a significant other in our kids' lives. It's not just that they're there to teach the sport; they are a great role model. They're another adult that enhances their lives, not just teaches them a skill.
Definitely.
Which is one of the great things and I guess that's the kind of the challenge or the thing that we should be looking for as parents. It's not just looking at a resume that might be glowing in qualifications, but it's looking at a character that's going to nurture a certain character in our kids that we're looking for. But you've both grown up in rugby. You're a big rugby household. But going on the journey with Jack and Tom, what are the unexpected challenges that have come up? That you've spent a life in rugby, as it were. But there anything that's kind of caught you by surprise?
I guess not too much. There's a couple of things maybe. Interestingly, Jack, as he developed and the team he played with, he had very different challenges from Tom.
Yeah.
It seems like a small thing, but Jack would spend most of his time losing rugby matches. Pretty much most of his career from 11 to 16.
It's character building.
It is very character building. Yes, and Tom spent almost every single game winning. And so they'd be at the same club, different pitches.
Yeah.
We'd keep running across the pitches and swapping over and watching both the games. And almost every time Tom smashed the team, Jack hadn't. And I mean, he handled it really well, and Tom just gave him loads of banter, and abuse. But I guess, perhaps an unexpected thing that cropped up were, and I don't say this in a big-headed way, but there were certain parents that would be jealous of what the boys were achieving, and there were certain situations that you had to handle or deal with or ignore from certain people. I won't name the names. Name and shame. Who would start doing odd behaviour. They would sort of make comments, put the boys down in not so subtle ways sometimes, and occasionally and stupidly to my face or near me when I was there, which was a mistake. So that was kind of an odd thing that you didn't really think about before, maybe, but
It seems pretty sad that it comes out, because we seem to be robbed of the ability of celebrating a young lad's talent. We seem to be robbed of the ability of celebrating someone expressing themselves in a way, because the envy or the jealousy kicks in, because that's not my child doing that. It's a sad part of being courtside, and we sometimes feel like, Elijah doesn't win every single game he ever plays, but there is that awkwardness sometimes of, if particularly he's doing very well in a game, you can see kind of that look on the other parent's face, and you think, oh, sorry, I might be ruining your Saturday afternoon here. But there's something within me that thinks we need to reframe watching, particularly youth sport, that whether my child is on the winning team or not today, I'm celebrating a sport being played well, and my kids enjoying themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that should be the number one reason why they're there.
Yeah.
It's if they're not enjoying it, then you shouldn't be bringing them.
Yes.
They should be doing something else.
Exactly.
But you can see in some situations where kids are just there because that's where they've been taken or where they've been pushed towards. I don't know, but in my mind, it makes total sense that they've got to get their own personal enjoyment out of the whole thing. You've only got so much time on the weekends to spend doing something.
Exactly. So how would you say that your role as parents have changed as the boys have got older and the kind of maybe their levels have gone up with the rugby? Has it changed from coach dad to sit on the seat and be quiet dad? I don't know. How has that worked?
Well, I did think about this, and perhaps the advice thing is one of the things that's been modified the most. From the early days, because I played a sort of reasonable level of rugby and play in the same position, we talk about the games. They want to talk about the games. Definitely. How did I play, Dad? What did I do? How could I improve? And you give them advice. But as it evolved, especially when they started picking up the other role models at the Wasps level, the academy level, some really good people around. There's a lot of good people to give advice. It perhaps became not more difficult, but you had to tailor your advice to them a little bit more, and or make it a little bit more subtle in terms of how you brought up the subject. An example of that would be, in particular, with Jack now, playing for starting for a Premiership side. He's got the best advice they could possibly have from these, really high level coaches. You have to be careful about how you go about saying things now, and kind of almost they realise it themselves, and then you can have a conversation.
I think we're just following on this thread, because when we met for a rather fine curry in that night in Reading, I've told many people of that place, but they're not sponsoring the podcast, so I'm not going to mention it. You talked very much about the brutal nature of elite sport, particularly around the selection process. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest problem from it all is everybody gets so excited, and of course you do. Let's say whether it rugby, football, any sport, you've been selected for that next level. You're a 13, 14-year-old, and you've been selected for Wasps Academy. Even our boys didn't get into a little bit later, which actually I thought was a really good thing that happened. And you're just one step up on the rung. There may be, let's say, 25 boys in any particular year, 30 boys that are selected. Now, by the time you get to the end of that selection process at 18, 90% plus of those guys are going to get dropped.
Yeah,
they're going to face like this massive rejection. They've had all this enjoyment of being selected, having this badge on your shirt. I'm part of Wasps. Being able to boast about it, talk about it. The parents are boasting about it. We boasted about it. It's just that human nature. That somebody achieves something, then you're going to talk about it a lot, and then bang, you're dropped. And I think you've got to go into it understanding that it's most likely you're going to face some rejection, or a massive rejection at some point. Only 2 or 3 boys will get selected at the end out of all these people who are here. So you've got to understand that if you go into that process. And I think one of the things that you've got to take from it is to actually actively enjoy the process while it's happening, because during that process you're still playing sport. You're not just doing it for the moment of being told you're passed into the senior academy, which is only the next step, but you're actively playing these games against very good rugby teams, and just enjoy those games. It's just like you're playing for your local team, week on week. That's how you've got to deal with it, and you've got to see the boys have got to enjoy it for those moments. The other part of it for me is I see a lot of those kids because they don't look at it in the right way, or the parents perhaps don't support them in the right way. A lot of these children are really talented sportsmen stop playing.
It's tragic.
At that point, at 18, and it's like, no, my God, I couldn't imagine not playing sport as an adult, or carrying on the sport that you're particularly good at, because it doesn't matter that you're not playing for Wasps. Play for a team, a lower division, or play for your local team, or because you get so much out of the sport.
Is there the risk then of the love of the sport being lost with the pursuit of trying to make it to the elite squad?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
100%. I mean, I can't. I mean, even the other day with Jack, he played a first team game. Played brilliantly well. It was an Anglo-Welsh Cup game. Played fantastically well, and he stood there in the kitchen with me, and he's saying, Oh God! And I said, you fantastic game, Jack. Absolutely brilliant. Love watching you. And he's like, yeah, but I might not get picked next week.
Yeah.
And I went, mate, stop.
Yeah.
Stop. Whoa. You just enjoy. We're on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
You know, enjoy your weekend and what you achieved yesterday. You were man of the match. You had a unbelievable performance. Enjoy that moment. Don't start thinking about what's going to happen further in the week. I know you want to keep stepping forward, but you got to sometimes stop yourself and realise when you've done something well, and when you've achieved something.
Because the next week was back into Prem, so he was like, obviously Harvey dropped.
Pascal's going to come in.
But in fact, he started. So he obviously played well enough in the Anglo Welsh, and not only did he start, he got man of the match again.
Good on him.
No, it's just incredible. But
it just sounds like there's the risk of the conveyor belt of game after game after game, and the senior you are, there's hardly ever a game that isn't important. All games matter, and therefore do you lose the joy of that great man of the match performance? You lose the joy of that victory. Savour it for a few minutes, chaps, because tomorrow morning we're gearing up for the next one. And is there then the risk then of losing part of the joy of playing the sport?
Yes, definitely. I think they take enjoyment out of little details of what they've achieved in the game.
So it's the process.
And they've got, they'll review the game, and I wouldn't say we sit down and review it together. I just like watching my boys play on telly. So you turn the telly on. I watch the same game 5 times, no problem. But if they happen to be around, then you can see your moment where they've done something well, and they rewind it, relook at it, and and we'll talk about it. And almost that enjoyment is about talking about rugby. I mean, we talk about rugby in our family constantly.
Yeah. Poor old Annabelle.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, oh, she'll come downstairs and say, oh, do we have to have rugby on? She's very good. In fact, she
is a gem.
She puts up with a lot, bless her heart.
Yeah. So, so within that, just to finish off that section, but I'm interested around the kind of this elite end. Joe, what advice would you give to parents whose kids are in this process right now, are kind of maybe looking at, I don't know the correct terminology, but look, they're getting close to selection or they're going forward for trials. What advice would you give through the journey that you've been on to parents so they can prepare themselves and also prepare their kids?
Yeah, I just think you just need to be realistic and just don't put any pressure on them at all. So I think that's the horrible bit. So I think sometimes actually the boys themselves know, they can tell really in their heart of hearts whether they're going to make it or not. Yeah. They might just, think, oh, I might just have a chance, but they'll know. Whereas I don't think some of the parents do. Yeah. You see it, you're there, and you think, I know, I think more so when we got to Tom, you knew the process. So we were like, you still don't know, but we were fairly confident just how Tom was picked. He was captain, he was this. It was very rare, unless he was injured, that would be the only time he wasn't selected. So after going through it with Jack, you knew they were the signs. Whereas with Jack, we went to the meeting with the academy manager, we were like, well, we think he's going to get offered, but you don't know. No. You really don't know. And I think that's the thing. And I think sometimes the parents do get a bit carried away. And I think actually their disappointment shows, and that's really hard you can't do that. Obviously you're gutted for them, but you need to this isn't the end of the path. If you want to carry on playing rugby, where do we go from here? Are you going to go to uni? Are you going to, a lot of the unis have fantastic rugby teams.
I think that's the thing. You've got to keep playing the sport. If you went into it and you're really enjoying the sport, then you should come out of it the same way. I mean, you've got to deal with disappointment. Jack actually had to deal with the disappointment of being dropped. Going to a trial for London Irish and not getting selected, and and to be, it really knocked him actually
Yeah.
for a little while.
He was 13, absolutely devastated.
13, and it's like, mate, you're 13. Don't just carry on playing, enjoy yourself. You'll be absolutely fine. It's not going to change anything for you in your life. You've got loads of other opportunity, and if they really want to achieve their goal is they're that type of person where they want to reach as high as they can, then that's great. And then they just keep challenging yourself and keep pushing and realize sometimes you're going to get knocked back. But from a parent's point of view, you've just got to make sure that they keep enjoying the sport, and so encourage them to keep playing, and whatever happens, remind them of why they were doing it originally, because it can distort things for people. Really, it can.
Yeah, we often talk, Kath and I, my wife, we often talk about kind of going back to watching our son play and being alive, watching him flourish in his sport, watching him thoroughly enjoy himself, not necessarily pinning on will he make it or will he win this tournament. But like yourselves, we get a weekly opportunity to watch our little and alive. We get a weekly opportunity to watch him thoroughly enjoy his sport. And I guess as the stakes and the prizes get bigger with a very heavily commercialized drivers that there are with sport, success can look like a very small window, can look like a very small thing to target, to aim for. And if you don't hit that target, well, what was the point? Well, the point is you spent a lot of time playing the sport that brought you great pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what level you're playing at. As long as you're gaining something out of what you do.
Yeah. I'm interested in knowing from different sports what kind of, for you, the pitch side environment is like. I know what it's like in and around the tennis courts and stuff, but what's the environment around a rugby match when your boys are playing that you think raises their game?
I think perhaps we're quite lucky because of the sport that they play. And I know it didn't just apply to the club that they played for originally. Rugby clubs have a reputation for being good family environments. Yes. So most of the pitch side elements that they would deal with were quite positive.
Yeah.
There's not too many stories that I can think of them not having really good influences from people, other parents and coaches.
And their teammates and go on, Willis.
It was always really positive. You get somebody from the first team, or a few guys from the first team, the captain, or just first team coach turns up and stands and watches a game. It's a real positive, encouragement for them. So, I mean, I've only got good things to say about it, to be honest.
No, I was just going to say, I totally agree. I think with it's very rare on the side of a rugby pitch you hear negative things. I mean, we've been football for a long time, and that was different. You had the nasty. Some of the women, you were like, whoa, it was not a nice atmosphere. Yeah. Whereas with rugby, you never hear parents shouting. Well,
a couple of screeches.
Yeah, but and also, I've been known to yell, quite loud. Even
Maria.
Even at Wasps. I think once I got a bit overexcited. I think it might have been Jack's first Anglo-Welsh start. He leapt up because he scored, and I'm like screaming away. You can see everyone. We were up in the friends and family bit. I'm like, oh, sorry, that's my boy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess that. Sorry.
No, I just imagine that everybody in the stand probably knew that he was your boy at that point.
I'm his mum.
I've got a picture of this in my mind now.
Yeah.
That bit was very different though. When you get to the sort of where they are today, and you've suddenly gone from just friends and family and parents and whatever to you're walking out of the stadium and people are stopping them and asking for autographs and stuff like that. It's all a bit weird. They're just your lads, so it's kind of, I just stand to the side and people getting selfies and all that sort of stuff is a bit odd.
And like we said, he's injured at the moment. So on Twitter, it's like, Jack Willis, how you doing? When do you think you'll be back? And it's just really weird. They're like, they actually genuinely care.
That's great.
About they want him back.
But equally, those same people, and that's where it's different. When you're family and friends around a rugby pitch, everyone's all very nice. But when you're not playing well, then you've they'll just tell you you're crap. They've got no control mechanism in terms of what they say about you.
How does that affect you though? They're talking about your boy.
Okay, you better ask my wife about this because I ignore it all.
I can imagine you do.
There's a bit both potential at the moment. So there are forums. I think we discussed that when we went out. That by the fans, and at the moment it's amazing because Jack's just breaking up. All the BT Sport guys are all mad for him. It's all just wonderful. And like Jack said, that's great. At the moment, it's all wonderful, and I'm new, and it's exciting. When I play a game and I knock on, and I'm this and I'm that, and I have a rubbish game, it's going to be a different thing. They're going to be going, well, he's a waste of time. Why is he starting at 6? Blah, 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 blah. And he said, you're not going to like that, which he's,
absolutely right.
I won't. But
how long before you post
No,
that?
I won't post. I would never do that. I would never embarrass him by doing that.
Are you both banned on Twitter?
Well, I'm allowed to like things, but I'm probably not like everything that he's tagged in. But it's funny. I think there was once I did something on Instagram. I posted something and he went, "Can you take that down?" All right, okay, fine. Obviously, they've got all their followers, and it's not cool to have your mum put a heart or whatever it was. Yeah. I know, that is weird.
My baby boy.
I think it's also weird as well when you're walking through the stadium and people, there's now posters. So as you walk into the stadium, it says Rico Arena, and there's a huge. I mean, how big would you say?
15 feet by 15 feet.
Wow.
This poster, and it says the tale continues. It's about season ticket holders, but it's our boys hugging. One of the games where Jack scored a try and Tom ran over and gave him a hug, and it's like, whoa, that's our boys. There's all these thousands of people coming to the stadium to watch, and the first thing they see are our boys. I've got that same picture of home, and that's a bit surreal. And people are walking past, going, oh, that's Jack there. But yeah, that's quite strange because, like Steve said, they're our boys. They're our little boys.
Yeah. My last question to this is, from the journey you've been on, is there any kind of golden nuggets that you'd like to say to kind of pitchside, courtside, poolside parents, wherever people might be?
I think, again, go back to just supporting them and being there and, just being involved. I mean, I still find it strange. I know not everybody is the same as us, but that they wouldn't watch their children play, whatever level they're playing at. Yeah. I never understood that. You'd get kids dropped at the top of the drive to play rugby, and then they'd be collected 3 hours later. And you're like, what? What's that about? For us, that's not what it's about, because how do you know they're not going to... For me, one of the big things is I always want someone there. What if they're injured? What if we need to do this, that, or the other? But it's just being there. But I think, and for them, that's been a massive, we know that that's a massive thing for them. So I think, I would always say, just try, even if you hate rugby or you hate football, you hate tennis, just try and show a little bit of enthusiasm if that's what your child is passionate about, definitely.
How about you, Steve?
No, I'm pretty much the same. I mean, we've always aimed to be at whatever games our children are at, so probably a handful of situations where we haven't been able to watch the kids and encourage them, to enjoy what they do. I think we've got no regrets in that regard. So, they grow up so quickly that, we can at least look back and we will not have any regrets. They really appreciate that. I think even if you've got a different relationship with your children from what we have, it can't be a bad example to always be there for them when they're doing the thing they enjoy. The other week, Jack was starting for against Harlequins, right? And Annabelle, who we haven't mentioned, who's my lovely daughter.
We're going to talk about her in another podcast.
Yeah. But my beautiful daughter, she was playing a hockey match, just a normal local hockey match. And this is probably the third time Jack's ever started for a Premiership game. Yep. And Joe just said, no, I'm not going, I'm watching Annabelle. I'm like, yeah, cool. And so we had, our third child was being looked after, and we were following her with her hockey. and she has the whole family come to her hockey matches. But it's the same, you know, they love the fact that they've got people who are willing to spend time with them and watch them and encourage them doing the thing that they like. So that's definitely the number one bit of advice.
That's great.
You know,
what greater gift can you give your kids than watching them enjoying themselves and expressing themselves and being
Really?
alive? Stephen, Joe, that has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I've loved hearing the stories, and I look forward to catching up with you probably for another curry some point in Reading.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Look forward to it, mate.
All the very best. Thanks so much for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers,
Bye.
Bye.
He dreams of Wimbledon, he's Courtside Dad.
So welcome to the post-match reflections on our second podcast as we listen to Steve and Joe talk about their boys in rugby. So Kath, what were some of your reflections from hearing fellow pitchside parents?
I think what I love from Steve and Joe, you could really sense that massive sense of community that they have, certainly in the sport of rugby, and that really came through very, very strong. And I think what I loved their description was about that constant coming back to the love of the sport. And I think the sadness that they saw where people focus so much on the end point or the destination of achieving the highest level, and absolutely you want that, but actually losing the love of the sport along the way, or if they didn't achieve to their expectation, that suddenly that love of the sport had gone, and I, that real tension of how you run that journey of keeping that love of the sport versus achieving the best level that you can.
Exactly, it was quite interesting because he was very forceful when he basically banged, didn't he? Bang, you dropped. And it's quite that for me. I'm always interested in listening to when people talk and then there's a physical reaction, because obviously the interview I've got going on there is me over Skype and I can see his body react to it, and they're dropped. And there's something that you heard within that of what resilience are we building into our kids, that when they get to the level which is actually their level, they're not so despondent that they haven't made it to the next level, but there is a recognition and still the love, as you said, of the sport that they're playing. But maybe the ability to say, this might have just been the wrong season. I might be next year I get to go to that level, instead of being so disheartened that I didn't make it, it's written off. Because there was a real tragedy when he spoke about some of the young people who got to that level and they didn't make it, and then they just fell out of love with the sport. Or that's it, that's me and rugby done. And that for me is an even larger tragedy than not making it into the elite end of rugby. It's now the enjoyment of that sport has just gone.
Yeah, and I think there's something in that, isn't there, around how, as parents for us, isn't it, how we help Elijah to really keep that sense of his own identity isn't him as a tennis player. His identity is more than that, but his passion and how he outworks that is in tennis. And so for me, that it's how we keep that balance of those two things being really, really important. So wherever that cliff edge is for him in terms of his achievement, that actually he has more in his understanding of who he is, that means he doesn't fall off that and land hard. Yeah,
agreed. And the last quick reflection from me, although they didn't say it, but I remembered kind of that African proverb of it takes an entire village to raise a child. And what they were discussing about the rugby community sounded like it took a whole rugby club to raise a child. And I wonder what other sports could learn from that communal aspect, that community aspect of rugby. And certainly for me, with our lad playing in an individual sport, what are we doing to maximise the communal dynamic of the sport, so he doesn't always think it's just me on the other side of the net on my own, but he enjoys kind of being brought up by coaches and by fellow peers who are all in love with the same sport that he is. Cool, so thank you once again for joining us on Courtside. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do remember to like, to comment, to subscribe, and to spread the word about this podcast. And wherever your courtside adventure takes you over this coming week, we hope that it helps you come alive with your children. Bye.